A wee kitten in search of food found its way to some garbage bins. There was a long strip of cloth hanging from one of the bin's edges. The tiny fur ball extended its claws to grip the fabric and climbed up the side. The bin was about a third full. The kitten hesitated about leaping down, but the aroma of leftover fast food enticed it. Overcoming its fear, the small creature jumped, landing effortlessly on a soft bag. Sliding off, it discovered a half-eaten hamburger and dove onto the food with fervor. This type of feast was not a common find. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps drew near. An individual was tossing garbage into the adjacent bin, expressing annoyance while rustling some material. The kitten was caught off guard, as the fabric it had climbed was suddenly on its head. After finishing its meal down to the final morsel and cleaning its whiskers, the kitten realized it was stuck. It ran to each corner of the bin, but the edges were too high to climb. In a desperate search for an exit, the kitten ventured deeper into the bin. Luckily, at the center was a circular hole. The animal poked its head into it. Its small head squeezed through, yet its ears barely made it. Once its head was out of the bin, the kitten felt a sense of relief. Unfortunately, it couldn't squeeze its whole body through. Despite its frantic attempts, its shoulders were too wide. The little animal pulled away from the hole, only to find its ears stuck again. It wriggled and tried to push itself free, but to no avail. Overwhelmed, the kitten let out a loud cry, but no one was nearby. "Take out the garbage, clear away some branches, get a move on, don't tell me you are lethargic," grumbled a young man to himself while expressing frustration towards his older colleagues. His co-workers, including the cook, maid, and gardener, were older and always found tasks to keep Vova busy. It was bothersome, yet he wasn't eager to leave his job. After all, it was worth the tolerance. By some incredible stroke of luck, Vova's mom had secured him a summer job with a prominent local businessman. Vladimir was always on the go, assisting the local landscaper, collecting groceries, and fetching parcels. He spent most of his day hustling, but his earnings were far better than any of his peers could hope for. With that money, Vladimir took his wife to local eateries, updated his attire, got a new phone, and even managed to set aside some savings. However, he never ceased complaining about it. On this particular day, he was tasked with disposing of the waste thrice. Something major was slated for the weekend. Important guests were arriving, and every nook and cranny was being cleaned for days. How could someone like the businessman, who barely spent time at home, produce this much rubbish? The trash bin near the house's rear entrance was already brimming over, so Vladimir raced across the street. He followed a hidden trail down the hill and came up behind a supermarket's car park. Here, hoping to go unnoticed, he swiftly flung the garbage bag into the dumpster. Just as he turned to leave, a pitiful mewl echoed from the bin. Curiosity piqued, Vladimir leaned over and was shocked to find a kitten peeking out from under the dumpster. Seeing him, the kitten's whimpering escalated, pleading for aid. "You've got yourself in, now get yourself out," Vova uttered, imitating his mother's tone. However, the feline was ensnared and incapable of freeing itself. Considering the reproach he'd face for taking too long, Vova sighed and reached for the waste bags. He began moving the reachable garbage into the adjacent bin, believing the kitten was merely lodged among the bags. When he managed to slightly lift the bottom of the dumpster, the dire situation of the tiny feline became evident. The commotion caught the eye of a supermarket security officer, who approached to deter what he thought was an intruder. Upon seeing the trapped kitten, the officer was taken aback. He helped Vladimir climb into the dumpster, but it was of no use. Despite their efforts, they couldn't extricate the ensnared kitten. The officer hastened to fetch a saw. To prevent any harm to the kitten, They shielded it under a few cloth rags and carefully sawed off the plastic adhered around its neck, resulting in a hefty collar. No sooner was it freed than the tiny creature flicked away from their grasp. Vova narrowly managed to catch hold of it by its tail, causing a discontent squawk from the kitten. Fortunately, the workers in the utility room had pliers, which Vova used to pry the plastic from around the creature's neck. There were red marks on its fur. Vova worried they might have hurt the kitten, but the worker lifted his hands. "No, it's your responsibility now. I have to report to the higher-ups about the trash bin. Take this cat and leave before the executives arrive." Vladimir wrapped the struggling kitten in the cloth they'd used while operating the saw. He was confused about what to do with the critter. Surely, they must be wondering about his prolonged absence at the mansion. Spending over an hour for trash duty was unusual. So, Vova went straight to work. If anyone knew about felines, it would undoubtedly be the housekeeper. She frequently chatted about her whiskered friends. Thus, the man, attempting to go unnoticed, crossed the lavish lawn in the mansion's backyard and rushed to the back door. The housekeeper was swiftly located. Based on her reaction, Vova had landed himself in hot water. To avert a commotion, he presented a grimy and terrified kitten with a bloody neck. "Assist!" the man exclaimed, not allowing the housekeeper to utter a word. He promptly narrated his cat rescue adventure. The woman was moved, instantly fawning over the kitten. She swiftly cleaned it up, treated the injury, and calmed Vova's worries. The scratch on its neck bled due to the sharp edge of the plastic. While the wound wasn't severe, it was expansive, causing the fur to become red. However, it had begun to heal, slightly visible on the cleaned-up animal. The bathed and hastily dried kitten turned out to be adorable, an enchanting white infant with ginger spots and an extremely sly look. The housekeeper couldn't resist admiring it when suddenly her eyes darted to the wall clock. "Oh no, I'm running out of time," she exclaimed, raising her hands in distress. Startled by the dramatic outcry, the kitten shot out of the tub into the hallway, disappearing around the bend. The housekeeper and Vova exchanged wide-eyed looks and sprinted after it. But there was no sign of the kitten around the corner. The hallway was empty, and the doors to the guest rooms were ajar. Suddenly, the sound of tearing fabric echoed from one of the rooms. Both rushed in sheer terror towards the noise. As they entered, the spooked kitten had leaped onto a curtain. The young one peered down, percepting their altitude, and decided to descend. Navigating down proved difficult. The kitten opted for the simplistic route, digging its claws deep into the velvety material and sliding down. As humans accessed the room, long tapes decked the drapes. The housemaid gasped at the sight. She nervously hovered over the silky material, smoothing out each fold meticulously. Then calamity struck. The kitten met the ground and hopped away from the window. Vova lunged, managing to secure the creature in his arms before any havoc was wreaked on the delicate bedspread or porcelain pot. The mansion reflected its proprietor's affluence. Vladimir adventured minimally indoors to prevent incidental contact with any oddities. Who knew? One of them might be worth as much as his kidney. "Is there possibly a spare drapery?" Vova queried the maid with trepidation. The woman assessed him. "Indeed," she responded, beaming. "We do have an extra. Let's mount it right away. We can keep the little troublemaker in my workspace for the moment, and you can help me switch the drapes before the proprietor returns." She referred to her personal usage zone, which comprised capacious racks hosting cleaning essentials and a table with a sizable ledger adjacent to the window. The woman documented all procurements and expenses incurred in running the residence within this ledger. The mansion's proprietor had suggested the adoption of a laptop for these tasks on numerous occasions, but the woman declined. She found traditional paperwork easier and more familiar. They quickly unearthed an empty cardboard box in the room. The kitten was settled inside, and a cup of yogurt was positioned nearby. The open-handed woman decided to partake of her noon meal. The furry kitten dove into the meal, purring loudly. The humans left the kitten comfortably engaged in the box, shut the doors, and proceeded to refashion the drapes. Vova teetered on a compact step stool, closely following the maid's directives. They were urged to work swiftly since the proprietor planned an early return. The fresh curtains sported a different hue, triggering concerns in the woman. Vova arranged the detached drapery flaps neatly, while the maid ironed out the creases in the fabric with a mobile steamer when footsteps headed toward the entryway. Did the drapes undergo a change? Sviatoslav Valerievich appeared taken aback. They did, the panicked maid blurted out. The proprietor wasn't fond of unexpected changes. His attire was always uniform, and his meals planned out 7 days ahead. No one could predict his reaction to an unexpected wrinkle. "This has a better aesthetic," Sviatoslav Valerievich said, tilting his head thoughtfully. "Good thing you possess fine judgment." He exited the room, prompting a collective exhale of relief from the housekeeping staff. This was a sure sign of a positive mood, just as long as he didn't run into the kitten, as his mood could shift unpredictably. Running afoul of Sviatoslav Valerievich could result in job loss. But surely no kitten could escape from a box in a sealed room, right? Where did it disappear? The distressed housekeeper asked for the third time. Upon re-entering the room, they found the box toppled over. The container that held yogurt was at the other edge of the room, with no sign of the animal. Vova had already looked everywhere, under the cabinets, atop and inside. The creature seemed to have simply vaporized. That was until raucous, furious shouting echoed from the kitchen, which was adjacent to the room. The crowd raced to it. A kitten was discovered in one corner of the kitchen, with an irate chef wielding a knife over it. She was reprimanding the poor creature, gesticulating wildly. To be safe, the man quickly disarmed her. He succinctly explained the origin of the kitten, and the chef revealed the little hellraiser had suddenly appeared in the kitchen. Drawn by the food cooking, the kitten climbed a stool and an apron to reach the countertop, approached the stove, and toppled the wall-mounted spice rack. The chef managed to catch the falling jar before it could fall into the soup, although the spices inside were already scattered in the boiling broth. "What am I to do now? There's no time left to cook again," the woman fretted. The owner dined at 1 p.m. on the dot. The clock was ticking relentlessly. Out of options, the chef ladled the soup into a bowl and brought it to the dining room. She practically held her breath as Sviatoslav Valerievich lifted a spoonful of the soup to his mouth. The man inhaled the soup's aroma and crinkled his brow. "Did you alter the recipe?" he asked sternly. "A couple of new spices were added," the chef admitted. The man took a cautious sip, gathering his senses. He proceeded to consume a few more spoonfuls. This gave the chef a little hope. If he wasn't spitting it out, it couldn't be awful. Eventually, Sviatoslav Valerievich gave his pronouncement. "It's delightful. Keep the change in the recipe going forward." The kitchen worker heaved an audible sigh, nodded swiftly, and headed back toward the kitchen. There, a waiting trio of housemaid, Vladimir, and a vexed kitten greeted her. The disgruntled kitten was once again held. The delicacy had been well received, she reassured them. The dish was to be made this way from now on. But how so? The exact amount of ingredients that fumbled from the jar was unknown to her. The only way she could replicate the dish would be to continue with her cooking experiments until she stumbled upon the right proportions. "Thanks, old pal," he commented. "And next time, you can station him near the pot. He seems to be a lucky charm for your cooking." Vova chuckled. "Skedaddle from here with your kitten." The kitchen worker waved her ladle menacingly. The lad immediately exited, the kitten in his wake. The kitty was weary of being held. It longed to scuttle and scrutinize the environment, but its human companions deemed it harmful. "How about taking him outside the mansion?" the housemaid proposed. "The rest of the day could be spent in the gardener's lodge. It would do him no harm and save the mansion from any potential mishaps." In agreement, the scheming duo made a beeline for the outermost part of the property, beyond the mansion. Eclipsed by tall shrubs near the wall stood a compact hut housing gardening tools. The door was ajar. Vova, in a single breath, put forth his narrative of the kitten's encounter and the havoc it created at home. The gardener was amused, presented a box with tall sides, and offered his property to house the kitten till sunset. The satisfied housemaid sped back towards the mansion, while Vladimir was summoned by his employer, Sviatoslav Valerievich, with the duty of delivering a document at the office. Vladimir rushed across town towards the assistant's office. In the meantime, the gardener had bushes that required trimming around the main entrances, but the kitten was not in favor of solitary confinement. As soon as the door was slammed shut, it pounced on the cardboard walls. It leaped around the box, causing a rattling tremor. The makeshift housing gave way, flipping over and rolling the feline onto the floor. After dusting itself off, the satisfied kitten assessed its new environment and examined new objects out of curiosity. It first managed to find a concealed sandwich, tore the wrapper, and devoured it. Post-feast, it turned its attention to a shelf lined with various tools. Involuntarily, it shoved a pair of pruners off the ledge. The loud thumping noise startled the kitten, causing it to leap and arch its back. The frightened little feline darted around with no mind for the obstacles in its way, gliding with brooms and rakes stacked in the corner, causing them to tumble. This only amplified its fear. Attempting to catapult over the pile, the kitten inadvertently brought down gloves, pots of seeds, tools, ropes, and various other diminutive items propped on the table and windowsill. By the time the gardener returned to his small abode, a silence had settled within. The man moved in, standing slack-jawed at the doorway, witnessing the chaos that had unfolded inside. The source of the turmoil bolted out of the doorway, nearly toppling the gardener. The kitten made a beeline for the grand mansion. "Halt!" cried the man. He gave chase, but the pesky furball skillfully weaved under the thick shrubbery, while the gardener was kept busy navigating the neatly aligned rows of meticulously groomed flora. The kitty was engrossed in its own affairs. It had picked the most conspicuous spot for its litter, right at the entrance. The man lunged towards the fuzzy perpetrator, hoping to nab him. The kitten, however, gave up its endeavor and scooted under shrubs close to the entrance. The gardener figured the creature would not escape from there, and feared the owner's wrath if he spotted the damaged and dirtied lawn. So, he focused on salvaging the green space for now. Simultaneously, Vova came rushing down the driveway with an official folder he was asked to hand over to Sviatoslav Valerievich. The gardener wished to express his annoyance at the restless ward, but upon seeing the owner emerging at the doorway, he opted to hold his tongue. "Handed over? Excellent." Sviatoslav Valerievich claimed the folder, examining its contents while the staff maintained a stiff pose. Suddenly, the petite auburn face of the kitty, its muddy paws, darted past the open doorway. Vova prepared to chase, but Sviatoslav Valerievich distracted him with an inquiry. Given the gardener never ventured into the mansion without a justified cause, the naughty kitten now had free rein to run about the expansive hallway, eventually getting lost within the multitude of chambers. A maid happened to cross the hallway, her eyes landing on the trail of grubby paw prints, a stark contrast on the spotless white tiles. Sviatoslav Valerievich's louder-than-expected voice echoed from the doorway. She had no time to fetch cleaning supplies. Swiftly pulling out her handkerchief, she dropped to her knees, beginning to wipe away the miniature prints. As the homeowner walked through the door, she was finishing up cleaning the last muddy paw print. "I admire your diligence," the perplexed Sviatoslav Valerievich observed. "But wouldn't it be more effective to use specialized mops or cloths for cleaning? Should we need any supplies, we can send Vova to the store." The gentleman turned his attention back to his paperwork before retreating to his office. Thankfully, the kitten had trotted off in the opposite direction. The upset housemaid rushed off to locate Vova, who was equally baffled. "We need to find that pesky kitten now, and you'll make sure it's relocated off the premises. Understood? I've had my fill of trouble from that furred mischief maker," she asserted. The young man gave a quick nod, and together they began their search. They soon realized that locating the sprightly kitten in their spacious house was not a simple task, so the housemaid asked for the cook, gardener, and the boss's personal chauffeur to help. After being given an overview of the situation, the chauffeur roared with laughter, but agreed to aid the search effort. The team treaded carefully, listening for any unusual commotion that might be caused by the playful intruder. Was that the distinct crash of the chandelier, the sound of curtains ripping, or perhaps the destruction of a hallway statuette? Strangely enough, all was serene. The search party moved from room to room, skirting around Sviatoslav Valerievich's office to avoid disturbing his work. The energetic kitten appeared to have disappeared into thin air. "Maybe we ought to give the kitchen another sweep," suggested Vladimir. The group concurred and swiftly began to move pots and pans. In the meantime, Sviatoslav Valerievich, having grown weary, put his paperwork aside and gave his eyes a rest. He had been working tirelessly for days on end, tackling issue after issue until sunrise. His continual lack of sleep and ongoing stress were beginning to take a toll. He relocated to the couch, laying his head back and shutting his eyes. He longed for a momentary respite, but it was elusive. His mind remained active, with a whirlwind of thoughts making it hard to rest. Abruptly, he detected the noise of purring close by and felt something warm brush against his legs. He opened his eyes to find a fluffy kitten beside him, rubbing against his leg and purring gleefully. "Where did you pop up from?" Sviatoslav wondered, picking up the little creature. Curling up comfortably on his lap, the kitten pranced into a dreamland of its own. The warmth and contentment evoked by its presence had a calming effect on Sviatoslav, who reclined his head on the armrest and found himself dozing off to the melody of its soft purring. He was roused by a strange noise at the door. It was hushed voices. The words were indistinct, but from the multitude of voices he surmised it was the majority of the staff gathering. Curious, he decided to see what the group was huddled about. The young cat had stopped purring. It fell into an adorable snooze, nestled into a ball on his lap. "He's not here. We've scanned all of the house," declared the driver. "Perhaps he darted out and has been aimlessly strolling outside," the gardener speculated. "We need to double-check everything," the maid stressed. "Let's begin in the hall. He could be tucked away behind drapes or sculptures." The weary search party reluctantly relocated to the hall. Everyone bent down to their knees, scouring under the seating areas. At that point, Sviatoslav Valerievich showed up. He was taken aback to see the employees scurrying around the hall floor. "Lost something?" the man inquired kindly while petting the sleeping kitten. "Oh," uttered the maid, shocked when she spotted the lost animal in the proprietor's hands. "How did we come by our house cat, by the way?" Sviatoslav Valerievich queried. The staff stood upright, averting their gaze downward and sidestepping eye contact. No one wanted to face any penalty, but there was a collective concern for Vova. "He's a good chap, industrious, gets along with all. It would be a shame if he had to leave. He's my responsibility, Vova confessed. Ah, so it's your pet? The proprietor asked, sounding somewhat deflated. Not exactly. Vova recounted his encounter with the kitten, smartly omitting the animal's escapades in the mansion. So, it's a stray then? Sviatoslav Valerievich was pleased. Ask Vova to get a collar, a dish, and other miscellaneous pet items. He will be residing here from now. The pleased proprietor returned to his workspace. As the door shut, the staff sighed in relief, followed by the maid emitting a loud groan. That tiny kitten caused a ruckus in the mansion in just half a day. What's going to ensue when he stays here permanently? The entire crew focused their attention on Vova. The proprietor shuddered under their scrutiny. Next time you opt to rescue someone, the landscaper urged passionately, bring them straight back home with you. Deal? Vova signaled his consent. He didn't see this outcome coming. Without warning, a loud crash echoed from the office, followed by an outcry. The now relaxed kitten started exploring its new surroundings. The employees exchanged looks, and in a flash, the hallway was deserted. Everyone unexpectedly had pressing issues to solve. Sviatoslav Valerievich laughed heartily, observing the troublemaker chase after papers fluttering from the desk. The kitten frolicked with gusto, carefree and oblivious, just like young ones tend to be. He wasn't aware yet that he had struck gold, assured of a lifetime of happiness, and never having to rummage for food in garbage bins again. Similarly, Sviatoslav Valerievich remained clueless about the number of new drapes, ornamentations, or even seats he would have to invest in. But that's a story for another time.